Hello learners, I welcome you all to this introductory class on the course named Gender Studies, which is in the 4th semester of Bachelor of Social Work program of Krishnakanta Khondikoi State Open University. I, Dr. Mridusmita Duara, Assistant Professor of Social Work, KKHSOU State Open University, welcome you all to this class. In this class, I will be talking about the various concepts that are related to the idea of gender, and I will be introducing you to certain key concepts that are closely related to it. Let us move on to the further part of this concept, that is the concept of gender. We basically know that there are two terms, sex and gender. The word sex refers to the biological differences that an individual has, and gender more often refers to the cultural and social differences that are socially constructed. The word gender has been used since the 14th century as a grammatical term. Although the words gender and sex are often used interchangeably, they have different connotations. Gender refers to either of the two sexes, that is male or female, or the third gender, with manifestations of cultural and social differences rather than the biological ones. That is why gender is said to be a social construction. Gender covers the broader range of definitions, identities than just being male or female. Ideas of masculinity, femininity, that is, we say as someone being masculine or feminine, are basically constructs of gender that we have developed through the years of gender socialization, the concept that I will be explaining in the coming part of this class. So as you see this quotation where the French philosopher and feminist activist Simone de Beauvoir has said that one is not born but rather becomes a woman. This means that when a child is born, when a baby is born, the day from of its birth to the time when one grows and one goes to the grave, we always go through the process of gender socialization. That is, we are taught how to behave and what to do, what not to do based on the sex, or we call the socially constructed idea of gender. That is why it is said that one is not born but rather becomes a woman with the way how she is taught to behave and how one is expected to behave in the society. Gender inequality and discrimination. So gender inequality basically has cropped up due to various reasons, and the roots are deeply ingrained in the socio-cultural construct of the society. So gender role decides the extent of social inequality and discrimination. If we look at it from the perspective of social evolution, we will see that the social scientists have talked of the role of estrogen and testosterone hormones, which determine how masculine or how feminine, so-called, the socially constructed terms, the particular individual is. Therefore, the gender roles decide the extent of inequality that exists in our society. For example, we know that there are certain work that only the male is supposed to do, or certain roles that only the female needs to do. So these are socially constructed roles. Social evolution, on the other hand, says that because of the hormones of estrogen and testosterone, we are hardwired to do certain kind of tasks. For example, the male going in the outside jungle and hunting for the family, and the women working and looking after the home and children, are basically because of the hormones, or how we have been ingrained in our mind as to what the role should be. So coming to the next part, that is gender role theory. This theory focuses on differences between the genders based on ascribed roles. Ascribed means someone giving you a particular role which is not by birth but through the process of socialization and teaching you how to do certain things or what to do and what not to do. Those roles are known as ascribed roles. So gender role theory asserts that genders based on ascribed roles as a result of social norms, socialization, both develop skills and behavior of the individual. Therefore, this role theory says that It mainly is a gendered behavior is a result of the socialization that we go through as child, and the way how we grow up and what is taught to us, and we also learn by seeing others and the way how others are behaving. On the other hand, the functionalist perspective of gender role suggests that gender roles exist to maximize the social efficiency and to create a division of labor in the society. So, since the functionalist perspective, we know it always asserts that different individuals, different groups have different roles to play, and it is a functional way to exist in a society, that there is division of labor in the society. So this, which is related to gender role, the functionalist perspective says that our roles are divided in the society, there is division of labor in the society. If the males are supposed to do that, if the females are supposed to do this, this will bring about social efficiency in the society. So that is what is the perspective of the functionalist view. The feminist movement takes the position that functionalism neglects the suppression of women within the family structure, as to how women are not allowed to work outside or is always pressurized to work in the home, and not encouraged to pursue a career and things like that. Therefore, the feminist movement critiques or criticizes the functionalist perspective, saying that they completely ignore that aspect of women as to what they want to do, and how women's wishes and dreams are also suppressed within the family structure. If we consider the functionalist perspective saying that division of labor is important and gender roles should exist as required. So feminist perspective takes a complete different view from the functionalist one. And there is intersectionality of gender discrimination. The word intersectionality means there is discrimination based on gender or your sex, irrespective of caste, class, religion, and race. So gender discrimination has always existed, irrespective of whether you belong to upper class or lower class, or higher caste, lower caste, any race, and you belong to any color. The gender discrimination always exists. Therefore, it cuts across different social strata of the society. Therefore, it is known as intersectionality of gender discrimination. Gender bias means inclination towards or prejudice against one gender. For example, we might say that there is gender gap in the payment of employees between the male and the female. You will see in the many work sectors this still prevails. And again, there is gender bias in accessibility to education, in accessibility to healthcare, food and nutrition. So gender bias exists, or your prejudice against one gender always exists in the society. We might always have heard about this concept that women are not good drivers, or a woman is driving, so be careful. So all these terms are gender biased languages or gender biased perspective that we have in our mind. These are some of the other key concepts which are related to the concept of gender. Patriarchy. It is a social system in which men hold primary power and predominant in the roles of political leadership, moral authority, social privilege, control of poverty, and the property line that we inherit through that of the father is known as patrilineal. So patriarchy is basically a form of dominance by one gender on another. And also we see dominance in the roles of political participation, in moral authority, then social privilege, and there are many things that where patriarchy is said to be a kind of discriminatory power that has always existed and is deeply rooted in our culture. Matriarchy is a social system in which women hold the primary power positions and key players in the decision making process, but there are very few examples of matriarchal society. Matrilineal society, on the other hand, is tracing of kinship, that is a line of inheritance, through the female line, that is through our mother. It may also correlate with a social system in which each person is identified with their matriline, the mother's lineage, which can involve the inheritance of property or title. For example, in Indian society, which is mostly patriarchal, patrilineal, we always inherit the title of our fathers. But in matrilineal societies, you the youngest daughter, or the daughters inherit the property of their mother, and also the title, and their identity of their lineage is traced to the mother. So moving on, after seeing the key concepts that are related to the concept of gender, let us see what is meant by this program or this course, which is termed as gender studies. Gender studies is an important discipline of study that tries to analyze and discuss the various forms of subordination in a radical manner. This is an umbrella term for various marginalized gender present in our contemporary society. So gender studies is said to be a multidisciplinary course of study where it takes into account various forces that lead to gender discrimination. And when we say the word gender, it is an umbrella term for various kinds of sexes that are covered under this perspective. It intends to understand and contextualize different forms of subordination in the political, economic, social and cultural spheres. The discourses of gender study critically analyzes various problems based on communication and of gendered identity and specific social context. While you must have heard of the term women's studies, which is more commonly used earlier. So women's studies mainly focused on the problems of the women and the factors such as patriarchy and other forms of domination that exist in the society. They say that for women's marginalization, the concept of patriarchy is the dominant factor which affects the subordination of women, while gender studies has a more broader perspective. It discusses structural subordination where patriarchy is an important part, but also there are other factors like economy, political and various other spheres that contribute to gender discrimination. Therefore, women's studies mainly focused on women's problems, and gender studies has a wider perspective. It also considers women and third gender and also rights of men to a certain extent. So gender studies have crossed the boundaries of a particular discipline. This is considered to be a multidisciplinary area of work. Gender studies has contributed to other disciplines also, and various other disciplines have contributed to the knowledge of gender studies. For example, in gender studies, the role of political science, the role of economics, the role of sociology, the role of understanding philosophy. So all these different perspectives of different disciplines are integrated in understanding the systems or the spheres that bring about gender discrimination. Therefore, it has a much wider scope. Now, why is gender studies important? The discipline of gender studies addresses different forms of subordination faced by women, men and other genders in various social structures. It is the study of production, reproduction and resistance to different norms that initiate and exercise different forms of inequality in the society. It focuses on the oppressive phenomena of the society based on one's gender identity. So the concept of gender bias, as you can see, plays an important role as to how an individual is treated in the society. That is known as gender identity. So based on your gender identity, how there are reactions, actions and how oppressive phenomena takes place in the society are studied in the course of gender studies. Now, why is this course important for social workers? It is very important for social workers because it gives a perspective to social workers or trainees who are undergoing social work education, so that they have a better understanding of the society and also acknowledge the fact that how much gender identity and understanding gender plays an important role in dealing with the society's problems. Therefore, gender studies should be an integral part of any social work curriculum. Now we see, if we ask ourselves why the question of gender studies, why is this discipline important? As we know, in our society and specifically in Indian society, there are kind of contradictory phenomena that exist in the society. For example, the Indian society would worship Indian goddesses, but also, as you can see in this image, which is a very popular one, it has a lot of meaning. It signifies that how do we worship female goddesses all over the country, or in most parts of the world. Still, how much violence, gender-based violence takes place in the society. So, in understanding, these complications that exist in the society, it might show something else symbolically, but what exists in reality might be a total different picture. So, this is just an example of that. There are various other social problems related to gender discrimination, and this is one of the most important ones, where a female child is not even allowed to be born. Female feticide is a process where, after sex determination process, which is illegal in India, still illegally in most of the places where people do it, and they try to abort if it is a female fetus. That is known as female feticide. And infanticide is after a girl child is born. That is known as female infanticide. So as you can see, India kills around 10 million girls in 20 years. That means you are snatching away the basic right to live of a girl child. Then dowry related deaths have been very common in India since the past. And though there are many acts against prohibition of dowry, and also against domestic violence, still we see that there are so many violences and deaths that takes place in the society. Honor killing is a concept where as I told you, the concept of gender and how you are socialized as to how one should behave based on the sex and gender, the socially constructed norms of an individual. So honor killing is a process where the honor is attached to the girl of a family, and if she chooses someone from a lower caste or from another caste or creed or religion, then the couple or the girl is targeted to be killed. That is known as, for the protecting of the honor of the family, you are killing the particular girl or the couple. That is known as honor killing. So these are all female related gender related violences that exist in our society. So moving to the next social issue, there are issues of abuse, rape and domestic violence. As I told you, in spite of there are acts that tries to criminalize violence against women, it still exists. There are cases of acid attacks where in most of the cases it's about punishing the girl. If a girl says no to the proposal of a particular man or a boy, it hurts his ego, and they are revengeful about it. So acid attack is a major issue in our society which is hardly talked of. We have just 1 or 2 movies which have shown this kind of violence that exists in the society. So it is like since you are not ready to accept my proposal, it has hurt the ego of the particular person, and he takes the decision to destroy her life by attacking the particular woman. So acid attacks are very common in most parts of the India, but it is a problem that is hardly talked of. So that is a major issue. And if we talk about different forms of violence with women, we know that there are different categories. It might be emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, psychological abuse, and also emotional abuse. So financially also you might get abused, through emotional torture or blackmailing and things like that. So there are different forms of violences, abuses that exist in our society. Rape is another important issue that needs to be intervened. So gender studies gives a perspective as to understanding how and what kind of problems exist in the society, what are the root causes, and what could be the probable solutions to dealing with such issues of gender-based violence. Now let us review some concepts which I have been talking about in between, which are related to the concept of gender. First one is gender socialization. As I told you, since the time of our birth, we are taught how to behave, how to behave in a particular way, what to do, what not to do. That process is known as gender socialization. Process of socialization is done by various, existing social institutions like our family, the society, the religious structure, our culture, and everything. So a child acquires its its knowledge as to how one should behave and how one should not behave. Parents, for example, dress their children based on the gender, that how we have been socialized to. A girl wearing a frock, a boy wearing a pant and a t-shirt, and not supposed to exchange that kind of dresses among the different sex-based children of the family. So these are certain gender socialization. Or for example, the pink color is for girls, the blue color is for boys, or a boy should always play with ball and car and should not play with dolls. For example, the girl also should always be playing with dolls. So these are gender socializations that we see since our time of birth until the time we grow up. And gender sensitive language. Now this is an important term. In most of our languages that we just say, if we believe that women and men should be treated equally, then we should be very sensitive about how we are using every language or word in our day-to-day communication. For example, we might have heard that a boy should not cry, or why are you crying like a girl, when we say this to a boy child. These are gender insensitive languages, that you are always assigning weakness to the female and being strong and having control of emotion as a trait of the male only, which is not true. Gender sensitive language should be used in our day-to-day communication. Also, children should be taught to be gender sensitive in the way how they are being communicated. And also another example, we will see that for example, the terms like chairperson or chairman or chair, we do not say the word chairwomen, right? So instead of using the term chairman for a male person, we can generally use the term chairperson. So similarly, these are gender neutral languages that can be inserted in our vocabulary, and these make way for fighting against gender discrimination in the society. Gender lens is another term which is related to this concept of gender. It says that it gives a clear picture to examine how and analyze the place that makes a difference in how we see the lives of in terms of the gender identity of an individual. Gender lens provides a way or a perspective how we look into an individual based on the sex of the particular individual. So therefore, gendered lens, that means understanding or empathizing the problems, issues, and different problems that exist because of the gender identity of a person. That is known as gender lens. Gender gap is a common term which we generally use. As I told you, in pay we might see gender gap. The same thing done by a male will be paid higher than compared to the same amount of work done by a female employee. Or if you consider the case of actors in our film industry, the male actors are paid more compared to the female actors. So that is a kind of gender gap, and India ranks very badly in the gender gap index, which I will be discussing in the coming classes, because of the gendered socialization, or the way we have always seen gender identity, where the male are always considered to be superior to the female, and also third gender rights have come up at a very later stage. So we know that gender gap is one of the main issues that exist in our society, and it gets into every kind of social phenomena. For example, gender gap issues are there in not only the economic aspect, in pay and work related aspect, gender division of roles, but also within the family, in the political participation, then in the decision making process of the house, in the society, in religious activities. So everywhere we see gender gap in our society. So these are some of the important concepts related to the concept of gender. Now coming to the concept of feminism. Why feminism is an important aspect in understanding gender and empowerment is because feminism is an ideology, a movement to end sexism or sexist exploitation and oppression in the society. So coming to the concept of feminism, feminism is an ideology, it's a movement to act against the oppressive forces and to end sexism and sexist exploitation and oppression. Sexist means based on your sex or based on your gender identity, the way a person is discriminated or treated. So that is known as sexist, being sexist. So feminism is a complex notion that has vast differences in meaning and connotation for people across different generations, different ethnic identities, sexual orientations, classes, nationality and other identities. Feminism is not a static notion, therefore it has evolved through history. There are different waves of feminism where we see that this ideology of feminism has evolved to a great extent. It has been through our lives and it has shaped the various lenses, gendered lenses that we use to view the world at large and mostly how we look at ourselves based on our gender identity. Feminism and gender empowerment. Feminism is an important concept that is related to gender studies. Why? Because we can say that empowerment of women, empowerment of the third gender has come up with this, as we will see in the further part of this class, that how in the waves of feminism the concept of empowerment has evolved. So it is necessary to resist the subordination, discrimination and injustice ingrained in our male-dominated or patriarchal society. So basically, if we see here, structural empowerment and psychological empowerment are the two types of empowerment that are commonly seen. Structural empowerment means you will see that a society, a government tries to empower or do against discrimination through laws, through economic and political aspects, securities and things like that, and also maybe through the system of education, through economic participation. You will see different steps that are being taken. That is structural empowerment. But sometimes structural empowerment may not be enough. Psychological empowerment is the most important one, because being emotionally confident and driven by how and what an individual wants, be it a woman or a third gender or male, is psychological empowerment. Only 23% of the women workers in the organized sector are there, which shows that very less structural empowerment that exists in our society, and 5 to 6% of women are in the decision making process only in organizations. Therefore, how strong is your psychological empowerment or structural empowerment that you are major component of the decision making process in any organization. The third gender has always been facing discrimination in every sphere of life, and that is these are the gender studies. This discipline is trying to explore the various forms of discrimination in this particular area. If we see the waves of feminism here, we will know that the first wave, basically it started in the 1830s. It started with the white American women and the European women, and they advocated for equal rights of women. They fought for voting rights of women and right to vote through organized protest, mainly focusing on structural empowerment, because they were focusing on political participation and property rights of the women. Therefore, the first wave mainly focused on structural empowerment. They wanted to bring reform in the political system, they wanted to bring reform in their economic rights and other things. Therefore, it is a very important wave of feminism, the first wave, starting from 1830s early to the 1900s. Then around 1960s, mostly you can see the concrete form of the second wave of feminism up to around 1980s, that is after the World War II. That is right to economic participation, the reproductive rights, where it is said the female body, the female has to decide whether she wants to give birth or she wants to not give up a certain a baby and fight against domestic violence. Therefore, the personal is political is another phrase that was used. That is that if there is domestic violence in the society, it needs to be reported and voices needs to be raised against marital rape, legalizing social issues and social crimes that are punishable under the law. They also demanded in the second wave of feminism equal pay for equal work. So we see that second wave of feminism both talked about structural empowerment as well as psychological empowerment. So in this image that we see here, which is related to the first wave of feminism, we see that women of the European origin and American origin, basically you see mostly white women are participating in the suffragette movement, where they are fighting for their right to political participation and the right to vote. Going to the next wave, that is the third wave of feminism. It started after the 1990s. It is more inclusive in nature because it took into along its movement various women of color, the lower class, the third gender rights, and equal pay for equal work. So in the third wave, it is an important change in the perspective, as we can see, because it became more inclusive in nature. Earlier, the two waves mainly were, the protagonists were white women, and now we see in the third wave that also the women of color and across different lower classes have also joined the movement. Gender theorist Judith Butler signaled that this pragmatic feminist shift in her books, her book was very famous. It was named as Gender Trouble of the 1990 and Bodies That Matter of 1993. So it gave a different perspective as to how feminism has broadened its perspective, and the third wave witnessed the emergence of movements such as the queer movement and transgender politics, which take an interest in the intersectionality of gender discrimination and gender sexuality. So the third wave has more widened the perspective of its thought. So these images show that there was debate over reproductive rights that circle around birth control, family planning and abortion of women as their rights, and they are known as women's reproductive rights. The fourth wave of feminism began around in 2012, focusing on empowerment of women and use of various internet tools and intersectionality perspective. It gave a wider perspective against body shaming, rape culture, sexual harassment, and the Me Too movement actually was born under this fourth wave of feminism. It had relied on a lot of virtual communication between different parts of the world and spreading the ideology of feminism, and how it has become more inclusive in nature as the waves have progressed since that time of origin. The fifth wave, we think that it's presently it is existing. There is more activism or rights-based perspective related to gender rights. So we assume that this is the fifth wave of feminism that we are experiencing at the present times. So I come to the end of this presentation. So if there are any questions that you have, you can mail me at this email ID. And also in the coming classes, we will be discussing on the various other concepts of which are related to gender studies. We will look into the perspectives of discrimination in the fields of education, in gender parity, in access to healthcare, then gender movements, women movements that have existed in the society, and also gender and development perspective, women in development perspective, how Human Development Index and gender parity index gives an idea of gender discrimination that exists in our society. So this course is a very collaborative one that takes into account different perspectives of understanding gender and how these are important for any social worker, because it gives a different perspective and it widens the way how we look into the society. So when after we are trained as social workers, it gives a different view about how to deal with the social issues. Therefore, this course, in the coming classes, we will be understanding the different concepts that are related to gender studies. Thank you so much.